Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our continuing series of Tech Bites. This is Bill Doolittle, Director of Marketing at Bowers & Company CPAs. And today, Patty Dobbins, who is CEO and partner of B&C Technology Services, will begin continuing the series of Tech Bites webinars that we've been having. And our topic today is Excel pivot tables. So very big crowd for this webinar. I think there's a lot of interest in pivot tables, and actually I'm going to be paying close attention myself because I use them quite often and sometimes get confused. Again, being a webinar attendee, you will be receiving future notification of the Tech Bite series. They'll happen about bi-monthly, about every 2 months, and we'll continue to ask for topics of interest from you in each webinar because that's where we'll try to go, is where the most interest is. In today's presentation, just a note, you do not need these for the actual presentation, but there are some handouts that you can click on in your dashboard. About a little bit down on the right-hand side, you'll see a little tab for handouts. And if you click on that, there's 3 different handouts that you can click on for review later on. After the call, but again, they aren't necessary for the actual presentation. Without further ado, we're going to get into it, so we can get into our hour of allotted time. So, Patty, if you're ready to go, we're all set.
Okay, great. Thanks, everyone, for taking time out to spend some time with us and taking a look at pivot tables. They are a pretty interesting topic, and we hear about them a lot. See how they might be used in your environment and how you might find them as a valuable tool. So hopefully you're going to find something in here. If you are a frequent user, you'll find maybe a little tidbit that you didn't know. And if you're brand new to pivot tables, that you'll find this really helpful in learning how you might be able to use them. So just to kind of get started and to get an idea of what version of Excel we're all using, I'm just going to go ahead and launch a poll. And if you can just respond to that, and we'll leave it open for 30 or 60 seconds just to kind of get an idea of where everyone is, what versions are out there being used right now. So it looks like we're getting pretty close. I'll leave it open a little bit more. Got about 95%. We're almost there. So I think we're pretty good at this point. So I'm going to go ahead and close that poll. And you should be able to see that there on your screen. So we've got a few people, about a third, using 2010, which is great, and then a little bit more using 2013, and a few of you on 16, so bravo, that's what we're going to be looking at, although the other 2 versions are totally fine. And then we have a little bit who's on 2007 or earlier, and just to kind of note that this is based on 2010 and going forward. However, a lot of the things that we talk about, the principles are the same. You just may find that the fields or the buttons are in a different location for you. All right. So if I could just get you to indulge me for one more poll, and this one is, have you ever used pivot tables before? So if everyone could, again, just respond to that, it just kind of helps me gauge how much time we're going to spend on kind of looking at how to create it. And again, if you don't have a ton of experience in it, that's totally fine. We're going to hit, hopefully, a little something for everybody today. So I'm going to go ahead and close that poll and just share it out with you. So it looks like, a lot of you maybe are looking at this for the first time, about half of you. Some of you have dabbled in it maybe a little bit. And then others are, maybe more power users. So hopefully, again, we'll have something for everyone here as we get going forward. All right. So I'm just going to go ahead and close out the poll and actually get started. Here we're looking at a pivot table, and I just kind of wanted to spend a little bit of time looking at, what is a pivot table and get an idea of sort of how it works before we really start diving into creating them. So this is what I have here is this pivot table. It is based on the data that is on the Data 1 sheet. So if we go back and look at that for a minute, You'll see that here we've got, some column headers that kind of tells us about what this data is. And this data is a couple of companies, Duet Designs and Music Man. And what we're looking at is the total revenue in thousands of dollars that these two companies have done for the last 2 years. And this is broken down by month, so we can see that there. So in our pivot table, what we're looking at is now here it is actually summarizing both of those years, 14 and 15, together across these months. And so we're able to see what they've done for the last 2 years by month. Another thing that we see is that it has a grand total, so that's nice as well. And then we can also kind of, the reason why they call it a pivot table is because you can move this data around. So if we want to take a look at maybe the quarter, very easy for me to bring that down, and I'm just dragging it, holding my mouse button down, and coming down to the rows section. And you can kind of see that green line that's showing up, at least on my screen it's green, that kind of lets you know where that's going to be positioned. And I'm just going to drop it ahead of, in front of the month. So now if I look at it, I see that now it's actually broken down by quarter. And in that, I have these subtotals here. So this is actually the subtotal for the quarter. And then I have my grand totals at the bottom. So we're going to kind of dive in, take a look at all the ways that we can manipulate this data, spin it around, because sometimes when you move data around, you have an insight that you didn't see before. And it can be really valuable when you're analyzing. All right. The other thing that you'll notice when you have your active cell in the pivot table is that you get some additional tabs up here. So Analyze tab and the Design tab. If you're using Office 2010, you'll see this as the Options tab, but really it's the same thing. They just changed the name, as Microsoft likes to do. So you'll have those available for you. They have lots of different things that are specific to the pivot tables and things that we can do. And the other thing that you'll have is over to the right-hand side, you'll have the pivot table field task pane, which is quite a mouthful, but this is where we're actually able to see the fields that we have and actually manipulate the data, move it around. And so let's take a look at the background of this pivot table and actually look at the data. I'm going to just switch back over to data one. As we look at this data, there's a couple of things that you might notice right away. One is that it does have filtering at the top. And one of the things that you can tell from that is that it may be a formatted table, and what they call an Excel table. And if that's the case, you'll also see up here a table design tab that's specific just for Excel tables. And this is something a little bit newer. I think that actually came out in 2010, I believe, being able to create tables. And it's really nice to have that, although it's not absolutely necessary. But you do have to spend a little bit of time maybe prepping your data, or at least looking at it and making sure that it's going to be ready and in the format to create a good pivot table. And that means it's going to be at least a data list. So I'm just going to pop over to data 2 over here. So you can see that this one, even though I'm clicked in it, is not actually a table. I'm not getting that special tab on the ribbon up here. So I know that it's just, this is just a table, or this is just a data list. It's you know, what you might think of as a table. So again, it's got those basic elements. It's got columns. It has rows, also referred to as records. So it has, you know, each of the data elements of these column headers up here. And one of the big things that you want to make sure is that you don't have blank rows in your data when you create a pivot table, because that's going to create some havoc for you. Just kind of looking down through here, I can see that there are no blank rows in my data. So great. Another thing that you want to look at is, although it's okay to have blank cells in there, it's better if all of the data is filled in, but sometimes if you're looking at perhaps sales, there just aren't sales for that particular product or month. So it is okay to have blank cells in there. So I'm just going to switch back to this table for a second and on data 1 and just take a look at a little bit of the options that are on the design tab. And I just want to spend a minute taking a look at that, because if you haven't had the opportunity to use tables before in Excel, to use what's called an Excel table, there really are some great benefits to doing that. And so I just want to show you a couple of things if you haven't used them before that you might be interested in.